Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted by Ali Naithani. Here with introductions is Ali.
Welcome to the show, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Susan Strauss, who is co-hosting with me. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Ali. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, especially since we have Ellen again today,
yes,
too.
Yes, we do. Dr. Ellen Kennedy is with us. She is the Executive Director of World Without Genocide at William Mitchell College of Law. And Ellen, thank you so much for coming back to talk to us. We are here to discuss a very important subject, and that is human rights in the Congo. So we have a lot of a good work to talk about, and so let's get started.
Great, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here with both of you. In the summer of 2005, I was very fortunate to take a trip to Rwanda. I was there learning about the genocide that had happened in 1994 and to learn about efforts at recovery and post-genocide reconstruction. One evening, I was with my husband and some other friends, and we were staying at this lovely resort that you see pictured here. This is on Lake Kivu in northwest Rwanda. I was looking out across the lake, and this is what I saw. And that beautiful view is of the country of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, right across the lake. A truly gorgeous place. But it's a place where there has been horrific violence and deep, deep tragedy since 1996. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because whenever there is tragedy and violence and brutality anywhere in the world, it ultimately affects us here at home.
And I don't think we always are aware of that. I think we see that as being, oh, it's on the other side of the equator. It's not going to impact us. And yet we all are citizens of the world, and it's a systems issue of living on the planet, and we do need to be aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. I think we see it so keenly in what happened in Boston on April 15th, and certainly in what happened on 9/11. We can't put a glass wall around these conflicts. They ultimately spill over, and they affect our economy, they affect our political security, they affect human rights on a truly broad scale. So that's what I want to talk about today.
Great.
The place that I'm talking about is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The map of Africa on the left is highlighting that country. Sometimes it's referred to as DRC, for Democratic Republic of the Congo. Those of us who are of an age might remember it being called Zaire. We see an enlargement of that country in the map on the right. I want to show you a really startling graph. This was taken from the New York Times, and it highlights the coverage in the New York Times of the conflict going on in the Congo compared to the conflict that has been going on in Darfur, that region in western Sudan where a genocide, so labeled by our government, has been waging since the year 2003. So for our viewers, the red bars are highlighting the number of articles in the New York Times about the conflict in the Congo. And you see it starting in the mid-1990s. The blue bars are showing the number of articles about the conflict in Darfur. You see that incredible spike that happened because of the awareness that what was happening there has been labeled genocide. But the most horrifying graphic is there on the far right. That tall red bar is the estimated deaths for the conflict in Congo, and it's about 6 million deaths. That short blue bar is illustrating the deaths in Darfur, about 400,000.
My goodness, Ellen, why is it that it's this way, though? When you see these numbers.
Horrifying, isn't it?
Yes. Why wouldn't they want to put this in the paper?
Well, I think there's a really simple explanation for this. When we think about awareness for Darfur, who is it who has really brought this issue to the fore?
George Clooney.
George Clooney. George Clooney's father, Mia Farrow. These are people who truly have an opportunity to raise awareness at a global level and to inform ordinary citizens. There is no George Clooney, there is no Mia Farrow at this point for what's happening in Congo.
And I just wanted to ask as well, when we look at the number of deaths, that includes folks that are not just in the militia. We're talking
Absolutely.
children, women,
right.
and citizens, innocent
right.
people.
Absolutely, Susan. These are the numbers of deaths of innocent civilians in these conflicts.
Gives me goosebumps.
Truly. And I want to give you a context for this. By the numbers, as this slide is saying, compared to other conflicts that have been labeled genocide, in the mid-1990s in former Yugoslavia, there was a genocide in Bosnia. 200,000 people perished. Darfur, as I mentioned, about 400,000, and that conflict is continuing today. Rwanda, 1994, 800,000 people. Cambodia, 2 million people. And then we look at that horrific spike, that truly unbelievable number, more than 6 million. Now that number of 6 million resonates for us, doesn't it?
Holocaust.
It absolutely
Absolutely.
speaks of the Holocaust.
Absolutely.
But I think, again, I just feel like that's something that we say happened so many years ago, and that's beyond our time. But I think
right.
where we are today, it's happening. It's still happening in the world. That just blows me away.
You know, that's such an important point. After the Holocaust, the world said never again.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Never again
Yeah.
would leaders sit by while millions of innocent people were slaughtered just based on who they were. Nothing to do with what they do in the world. But as you see from looking at this slide of by the numbers, never again has come to mean over and over and over again.
Ellen, are there any countries, including our own, that are doing any kind, I can't even use the word of effective action, but are doing any sort of action of recognition of what the atrocities are and trying to influence that?
Oh, I think that's a great question. Our country does a great deal. All of the European Union countries do a great deal in terms of helping to support peacekeeping initiatives that are led by the United Nations, in terms of providing humanitarian relief and aid, and also in terms of exerting diplomatic and economic pressure. But it's not enough. It's simply not enough.
Obviously.
And it's not enough, Susan, for a really important reason. Ordinary people like us have not said to our leaders, people like us around the world, more must be done. More must be done. For asking him to take action. Why didn't he hear from them?
But why didn't he do it anyway?
Why didn't he hear from them? They didn't hear from us. He acts when the House and the Senate, any president acts when the House and Senate urge the president to do so. I did nothing when that genocide was going on in Rwanda. I never picked up the phone and called my senators. I never
Me either.
called my representative. And in many ways, we are the face of domestic and foreign policy. Our representatives at that national level are our responsibility.
So really, it's that simple of just
Absolutely.
calling, making a phone call?
Absolutely. Raising awareness.
My
Yes.
goodness.
We need to do it.
Yes,
We do indeed.
Absolutely.
We do indeed. As I mentioned, I was in Rwanda in 2005, and Rwanda's issue and Rwanda's genocide connects to what's happening in Congo. On this map, I've included a red arrow, and that's showing the very tiny country of Rwanda. It's the size of Maryland. It's a little dot.
Wow.
But yet 800,000 people were slaughtered in 100 days. That's the length of the school vacation in the summer here in Minnesota. And what happened as a consequence of that genocide in Rwanda was that people fled. And you see the flight in this picture. People were fleeing out of Rwanda, largely those who were the perpetrators of that genocide, those who belonged or who identified with an ethnic group called the Hutu,
Oh,
who were the perpetrators of that genocide, those who belonged or who identified with an ethnic group called the Hutu.
oh, I
The
remember. Yep.
Hutus had slaughtered Tutsis and
Yes.
moderate Hutus. So hardliner Hutus had engineered this horrific genocide.
So I just want to break that, what you just
Yes.
said down. So simply, what that means is just because of who you were as a person,
Yes.
you
Yes.
were persecuted.
Absolutely. The Genocide Convention defines genocide as being the intent to exterminate a racial, ethnic, national, or a religious group. That's it. Racial, national, ethnic, or religious group. So simply based on the identities that people are born with, that's how they become targeted. And you can think about that in all of these genocides that I've mentioned so far. People are targeted simply based on who they are. Now let's go back to that map. You see the national boundaries of different African countries. We know that the imperial powers of Europe carved up Africa and created countries without consideration for the ethnic groups that lived in those countries. So boundaries were drawn that included people from a single ethnic group across those borders. And that's what was happening after the Rwandan genocide. Hutus were fleeing across the border into neighboring Congo, where there were other Hutus. And the government of Congo was sympathetic to those Hutus at that time. The armed militias from Rwanda fled. So what happened when they fled into Congo? By the thousands and thousands and thousands, they brought with them the legacy of the violence that they had perpetrated. President Bill Clinton was in office during the genocide in Rwanda, and he said he probably could have done something to save a few 100,000 lives.
My goodness.
Unbelievable to hear that, isn't it? He said he didn't do anything because he didn't hear from a single one of the 100 senators or a single one of the 435 representatives.
They just continued it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because there also are Tutsis living in Congo. So we had that same issue. Now, people get exterminated based on who they are, but that's not the reason why it happens. The reason why it happens is a desire for control and power. And how do people get that control and power? They get it over access to minerals, resources, to valuable things that a country has. And what's at the heart of what's going on here in Congo? Under the ground, Congo is the richest country on the planet. Diamonds, oil, and minerals that are used in our small electronics, in our computers, in our cell phones, in our games, in all of our small electronics. And gold is under the ground in Congo, used in jewelry. So the fighting in the northeast part of Congo is about access to these resources and about bringing that legacy of violence and brutality into that part of Congo. The United States is importing a great deal from Rwanda, and this chart is illustrating the continuing increase of our imports from Rwanda. But Rwanda doesn't have much that's really valuable. Rwanda's major cash export is coffee. We're not importing coffee at this level. What we are importing are these valuable resources, but Rwanda doesn't have them under the ground. So where do you think they're coming from?
Congo.
Exactly. They're coming from Rwanda militias in Congo that are smuggling those resources across the border into Rwanda. Look at similar imports from Congo. So the United States, companies in the U.S. have significant imports of these particular resources. Now let's look specifically at what's going on in northeast Congo. This is the area that I'm talking about, very near to Rwanda. And this map that has all of these little diagrams on it is representing different militia troops that are fighting in this region. Some of them are armies of the Congolese government. Some are armed and supported by the Rwandan government. Some are paramilitary groups that have no national affiliation. And what's happening is all of these militia groups are fighting to get control of the land under which these raw materials exist. And what do they do when they get control of the land? They sell these raw materials. They're selling coltan, gold, tin, tantalum. They're selling these resources, and then they're buying more weapons to continue
So it just continues
the cycle of violence. That's right. This map is highlighting where the minerals are. And I want our viewers to pay special attention to that oval with the stripes.
Okay.
That oval with the stripes is illustrating where the underground deposits are of coltan. Every one of our cell phones has coltan. Coltan makes our phone vibrate. And 80% of the world's coltan is right there
Wow.
under the ground in Congo.
My goodness.
Wow.
So what happens? This cycle of violence begins with us. It begins with the demand for small electronics in the north, which then drives the demand for coltan in the Congo. It creates the fighting over these resource-rich areas. And the fighting is destroying the habitats. It's destroying the wildlife. It's ruining the water sources. It's devastating not only human life, but it's devastating the environment as well.
My goodness.
Oh,
It's just unbelievable, the effect. And it.
Yeah.
But you think, where's the government in all of this? That's part of the problem.
Absolutely. That is part of the problem. And I mentioned a moment ago that some of those people who are fighting for control represent the Congolese government, the Congolese army. So this is a story over who's going to have power, who's going to have control. Always. The picture on the right is showing the way that these mining efforts are being handled. And you see that this labor is being done by hand.
Oh, that's a small child's hand.
That's right. That's right.
Look at that picture, Susan.
This is
That's
slave
just-
labor.
That's just heartbreaking.
Exactly. Children are used as slave labor for mining these resources. And in all of these militias as well, they are being used as child soldiers.
Oh, at what age do they start?
Very young, very, very young. Probably as young as 6,
Oh, my
as young as
gosh.
6. So these are children who don't have a childhood. Now, let's think about the implications of this. If a young person has a life like this, what will that person know as an adult?
Yes.
Sure.
Violence.
It's just to
Exactly.
repeat that cycle, right? You never
Exactly.
get out of it.
You
I
never get out of
presume.
it.
You know that that's
That's
the way the world is.
Yes, that's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
And it perpetuates itself.
That's right. So if we think about the fact that the Boston bombings, that the 9/11 bombings had their root in violence that happened halfway around the world, we can see that the spread of violence and the spread of weapons anywhere affects us here. I mentioned the destruction of the natural environment and the habitat for animals. We're all familiar with the wonderful gorillas.
Yes.
And the gorillas, too, are perishing at an alarming rate. So the destruction of the life of children, the destruction of the animal and natural habitats, the slave labor is truly cause for an imperative for our action. Now, a story that is particularly heinous here is the story of the violence against women. Congo has been called the rape capital of the world.
Oh my gosh.
It's been called the worst place on earth to be a woman. And why is that? We know that to strike at the heart of a society, all one has to do is strike at the women. 500,000 women were raped during the genocide in Rwanda. There were rape camps in Bosnia during the 1990s. We know that there were more than 500 brothels set up in concentration camps during the Holocaust. We know that violence against women happens here in Minnesota as well. Every year, we hear the total of women who have lost their lives at the hands of their domestic partners. An estimated rape every minute is occurring in Congo. What I want to do is tell you about a prosecution and a conviction that happened not very long ago. The man in this picture, Thomas Lubanga Diallo, was indicted on charges of rape, child soldiery, crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. And he went on trial in January of 2009. He was convicted.
Good.
And he was sentenced to years and years and years in prison for those horrible crimes. The International Criminal Court has indictments out for other perpetrators in Congo as well. The International Criminal Court is the only international or the only tribunal that exists in the world to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and aggression. And the International Criminal Court exists to prosecute individuals when their own countries are either unable or unwilling to prosecute people themselves. So the International Criminal Court stepped in because this trial was never going to happen in Congo. So this is really important to know.
Did it send a message? Did it do?
I believe it did send a message, absolutely, absolutely.
But it's like Ali said, that's one person, and there's thousands that are raping.
That's right.
So how do
That's
you
right.
get the others to pay their due?
Well, let's look at this. Just a couple of months ago, in March of this spring, this man, Bosco Taganda, called the Terminator because of the terrible things that he was doing, walked into the U.S. Embassy in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, and he turned himself in. He was indicted by the International Criminal Court in 2006 for war crimes, rape, and child soldiering. And he has been extradited by the United States government to the International Criminal Court. So this is beginning to happen. Impunity is ending. Impunity meaning that people can walk the face of this planet without being held accountable. In addition, there is a UN peacekeeping force. The largest UN peacekeeping force on the planet has been in Congo. It's not big enough. It's never well funded enough. But this truly does represent a global effort. And in Congo itself, there are resources now for Congo's women. I'm sure many viewers know of Eve Ensler,
Yes.
the brilliant writer and playwright.
Yes.
Pansy Hospital exists in Congo as a hospital for women and girls who've been brutalized by rape and by other crimes that are almost unspeakable. She has created something called City of Joy to help these women restore their dignity, restore their psychological health, restore their sense of purpose, and their connection to their families and communities. And I want to share a personal picture.
Nice.
She was here in Minnesota very recently speaking at the Mayo Clinic, where she actually had been treated herself for cancer. She was speaking about her new book, and I urge all of the viewers to read it, called In the Body of the World. It's about her own personal experience in Congo with the women of Congo and her own personal journey from illness back to health as this is happening in a parallel journey with the women of Congo. The Mayo Clinic has been involved in reaching out to Pansy Hospital, and in 2010 sent a delegation to Pansy Hospital.
Great.
Dr. Dennis Mugwebe is pictured on the left. He's the director of that hospital. And his son, Dr. Alain Mugwebe, is now here at the Mayo Clinic studying, and he will speak at Congregation Shir Tikva in Minneapolis on November 7th at a talk open to the public.
Great.
In 2010, in the Wall Street Reform Act, a very important addition to that bill added a requirement, and that is that when mineral exports from Congo are being mined and then being exported to the United States, these exports have to have certification indicating where they are coming from. And based on that, the Enough Project, headquartered in Washington, D.C., has generated a remarkable program, a very simple program that they call the Conflict-Free Initiative. This program is designed to raise hope for the women of Congo, and not only the women, but the girls, the boys, the innocent men, everyone who's affected by this violence. And what this very simple program does is the following. This is a simple little graphic. And what's highlighted here are names of electronics companies. Samsung, Dell, Acer, Apple, Motorola. And these companies are being labeled as green, yellow, or red by the Enough Project. Those companies that are green are given a 30% or above in terms of their efforts to clear source their minerals, to buy only from mines that are not using slave labor, that are not perpetrating violence against women and children. Companies that are rated with yellow score between 11% and 29%. They're doing a little, but they're not doing enough. Companies that are rated red have done nothing yet. So what we at World Without Genocide at William Mitchell College of Law urge people to do is to visit our website, worldwithoutgenocide.org, and to look at this ranking. And every time we buy a small electronic, every time we buy a cell phone or a laptop or a music device, be sure it's coming from a green-lighted company. Send an email to those companies that are highlighted as red or yellow.
Yes.
And say, we know that you want to get on board with this important effort. Please do more. Please do what you can. William Mitchell College of Law is one of 156 campuses that has passed a resolution. My challenge is to all of our viewers, will you be next?
Wonderful.
Oh.
Ugh, that's
Well,
great.
thank you so much for this powerful conversation. I think you have brought some great light to this terrible tragedy, and I would say the fundamental message is just what you landed on. We are all part of this, and we can do something.
Absolutely.
And your message has been I know for me personally, has really been a catalyst to ignite me to be much more proactive in this. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure to be with both of you and with all of the viewers today.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. And we thank you for joining us today on It's a Woman's World, and we hope to see you next time.